keynote session. So let me introduce our first keynote speaker, John Heinlein. I was very fortunate to work with John a couple of years at my ARM years, and he's definitely he's currently a VP of marketing, but we knew him as an expert in scuba diving, and it's probably the most versatile individual I have ever met in person. So today he's going to focus on what he knows best, is the semiconductors IP, and he will give us a broader view of the whole world and how the future of connected world is given to give a lot of opportunities for the SoC design and semiconductor IP. So without further ado, let me introduce John Heinlein.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Do you want to use these slides? Do you want to use the slides? It's okay. Put it that way. That way. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to apologize in advance that I have a terrible cold today. So I hope my voice is okay, and I hope I don't pass out on the stage. And if I pass out, just give me green tea and it'll be okay. What I want to talk to you today about is something that's very important to ARM, is that the increasing connectedness in the world and the trends we see in mobile devices and in devices across the world. And in general, we think that there's some very exciting trends that can benefit all of us, because ARM and our business model is such that we don't make any chips. We make test chips, but that doesn't count. We don't make end products. We make technologies that go into your company's products and hundreds of other companies' products. And so we're only successful if you're successful as well. So with that in mind, we're looking to the trends for the future and areas of growth, and what should we be doing in the future. Of course, today we're going to talk about predictions and looking out to the future, and of course we can only do the best we can to predict where that's going. So first, I'm going to make this a little interactive. I'd like to know, who knows what the population of the world is today? Who knows the population of the overall world? Anybody?
7 million.
Yeah, 7 million. I think it's 7.1 billion. That's a lot of people. So as we look to the future in around 2020, we see this number only growing, and we see the number getting as big as 8 billion in only about 7 years' time from now. So that's adding almost a full billion people in just a short time. And exponentials are such that the growth of the exponentials happens more the more you go. And so actually things can go really rapidly. And so I think this is going to affect a number of important changes in the world. First, as we get to 2020, we're going to see a very strong growth in the middle class. Middle class tends to be the biggest consumer of electronic goods. They have more discretionary spending, perhaps. And we're seeing a lot of that growth. And so we could see another billion consumers in the middle class in the next 7 years. And that's real market growth. Similarly, we're seeing very strong growth in general in internet-connected devices. Devices that connect to the internet are becoming more and more prevalent, and I'll speak more about that a little later on, where things that didn't used to be connected are now being connected. And that's providing benefit to all of us, and of course market opportunities for the semiconductor industry. So we see the growth very strongly, and conservative projections are 30 billion internet-connected devices in 2020. And depending who you listen to, sometimes their number can be bigger. Of course, this growth also puts strain and stress on markets. It's going to put stress on healthcare, and it's going to cause a strong growth in energy demand. And I'll talk about these effects as well. Another thing that happens is it drives a very strong increase in data volume. We're seeing the amount of data, global data created in this year versus 2020 will grow by about 10x. Okay, and so this zettabyte is 10 to the 21. I've never used Zeta before. It's 10 to the 21, and that's data creation in the year 2020, and it's because of the exponential growth in connected devices and the exponential growth in population and so on, and that's causing a lot of interesting opportunities and challenges for us as we try to manage that data growth. And in general, we see things like, for example, trends in telemetrics and analytics that we didn't see before. On the left side, you see an example of a grape farm. It's a grape farm in Napa Valley, and there's a company called Grape Networks. Not Grape Networks, Grape Networks. And what they do is they put crop sensors out, spread throughout the field, and they're connected through a self-discovering mesh network. And this is based on an ARM partner, I think Summit Microelectronics, I think. ARM licensee, developing this self-networking chip that then collects data about the sun, the heat, the humidity, and the moisture, so they can do a better job of using the resources, watering when they need to, figuring out how the crop is doing to get maximum yield, and also reducing waste. In the same way, if you think about streetlights, if you've ever looked when you're flying in on an airplane, you see lots of streetlights on. A lot of the streets have no cars on them. So why, and there's no pedestrians. So why do you have a street light on when there's no cars and no pedestrians? So if we can do smarter things with streetlights, just converting to LED lights will save a huge amount, but I'll tell you later about things you can do that's even more, can increase savings further. So I'm going to talk today about 4 key areas that we think are important areas for growth. The first is smart mobile devices. I'm showing a smartphone here, but this covers not only smartphones, but also tablets and other kinds of devices as well. Next, about connectivity, and this is about personal connected devices, things like things you wear on your wrist or wear on your body that connect together and tell you information. Also about energy use. Here's an example of a smart motor, but I'll talk more broadly about energy use and how we can be effective. And then finally, and close to home, for us as semiconductor professionals, how do we implement these solutions in a chip that gets to customers' hands? Because unless it gets into customers' hands in the form of a chip, we can't make any money off of it. Now, the semiconductor industry opportunity, this is chip sales. This is not end device sales. This is chip sales, is growing very rapidly. If you look at the mobile space, now this mobile line is mobile smartphones, tablets, and PCs. This year, 2012, or last year, 2012, 4.8 billion units. This is millions of units. So 4.8 billion units last year. And we see this in 2020 growing very, very fast to about 10 billion units, very strong 12% annual growth rate. Similarly, home devices and so on, those are also growing strong, a little smaller market, but also growing very strong. One of the things that's very interesting as well is in the embedded side, embedded in general, and also what we're calling, and many people are calling the Internet of Things, that's things that are connected that never were connected before, growing very, very strong, 22% annual growth rates. And in general, the embedded market overall is projected to be in the 20 billion unit range in 2020. And even though those devices tend to sell for a lower price, when you have such a huge market, there's still a great market opportunity for all of us with that kind of market. So these are projections from industry analysts, various industry analysts collected together. So I think there's a great opportunity for us in these spaces. So let's look at smart mobile devices first. In general, we see that smart devices and mobile phones are really becoming the world's computer. The speaker earlier talked about the post-PC era, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a bit. But because of the lowering of the price of mobile phones, because of the convenience and the networking of having mobile phones being connected all the time, it really is evolving that mobile phones are becoming the central hub of communication. And today, you're seeing a very big difference in the kinds of price points from very low-cost phones to smartphones. And we see that trend is going to homogenize in certain ways in the coming years, and I'll say about that. So as we talked about before, 2020, around 8 billion people. Well, today, there are already around 6 billion mobile subscribers. You say, how can there be 6 billion subscribers? Well, some people have multiple phones, maybe have a work phone and a personal phone. So today, around 6 billion subscribers today. Of that, only around 1 billion smartphones installed. Now, phones have been out a long time, and it's taken us around 16 years from the first smartphone, you can argue which one that is, but the first smartphone until today, until getting to a billion units, about 16 years to get to the first billion. Well, we're seeing a very, very strong growth in that. Many analysts predict that the smartphone, the next billion, will be sold only in 3 years. So the 2 billion smartphones only in 3 years. Actually, we believe that will happen even faster. And our projections, it seems like that may happen much more quickly, potentially even as many as 1 billion smartphones sold this year alone. We'll see. But ultimately, by 2020, we see the installed base of smartphones to be we think it could get upwards to 5 billion smartphones. And this is based on industry analysts. So in general, there is a strong growth rate. And while you say, and sitting here in Silicon Valley, it might be easy to think that everyone has a smartphone. You know, I don't know anyone who doesn't have a smartphone. But actually, the penetration is quite low globally. Even in the United States, very westernized, industrialized country, only 48% of subscribers are using smartphones. And in very populous countries, Russia, China, the numbers, and even India, very, very small, very small penetration of smartphones. So these markets with lots and lots of huge populations still have big market growth potential in smartphone availability. Now, part of the reason today is that smartphone pricing is quite high, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And as we're able to deliver smartphone experiences for a range of price points, I think it's going to allow more and more folks to be able to adopt those. Now, in general, we think smartphones, that one of the reasons it's so interesting is it connects people together in ways that they weren't connected before. Smartphones are allowing people access to data and services that's very valuable and beneficial to their lives. And while we may check sports scores or stock or coursework, do a work on our phones, in areas that are less developed, a smartphone can be an invaluable tool for farming. It can be an invaluable tool for connecting buyers and sellers in developing markets. Because we may have developed markets in the West, for example, but in some areas, it's very tough to know crop prices, farming trends, rainfall, and those kinds of things. Secondly, in some areas, there's also a case where many areas don't have adequate medical care, and many areas don't have adequate hospital facilities. And so more and more we're seeing a trend toward enabling smartphones to be a hub for medical devices. So you can have things like analytics that use the smartphone and use the networks to send data to perhaps remote physicians. Here's an example of treating patients remotely in Africa. Similarly, we're seeing devices, and we're seeing devices looking at coming to the market soon that can do analytics. If you think back to Star Trek, he had a tricorder, and he would check a patient. Well, actually, we're getting very close to that, and there's an active competition right now to see what company can come up with the first tricorder-like device that can detect 13 common diseases with a smartphone or a smartphone-connected device. So it may be that the next time your child has an ear infection, you don't take it to the doctor, but you plug in a device in your smartphone and do a first round of triage yourself. And I think that's very exciting. And in fact, mobility is shaping behavior in some fundamental ways. Some of this is commerce-related. Some of it is the way people get their data. For example, 79% of iPad users, that's their primary device for accessing the web. Last year, I bought my dad an iPad. He's in his mid-60s. Not computer literate in any way, and he's absolutely hooked. It is the only platform he uses to connect to the internet, and he's very comfortable with that now. And so it's bringing the form factor and the way to use mobile devices is making people who weren't comfortable with a PC more comfortable with connecting. This year, 2013, is the year that tablet PCs will outsell laptop PCs. I'm pretty sure it has already happened, but it's projected to happen this year. So that's a big shift in the post-PC era we talked about earlier. In fact, because of this trend, over the 1 billion smartphones and smart mobile devices shipping in 2013, we see over 50% of these devices will be based on ARM. And that may surprise you because you think this is a PC-dominated industry, but in fact it's already shifting over that more than half of and this includes PCs, tablets, and smartphones, more than half of the devices are based on ARM. And also, you're seeing this trend towards apps. Apps is a concept that didn't exist only a short time ago, but now 35% of users in China spend more than 2 hours a day using apps. And the customization and the customized experience that apps can bring has changed the way people interact. It's not just text messaging, it's not just phone calls, it's not just surfing the web, but also this customized experience that apps can bring. So when we talk about the post-PC era, and I'm not going to talk too much about ARM products specifically, I'll allude to them a little bit here and there, but as we started out a few years ago, this is only a couple of years ago, ARM was primarily delivering devices that were suited as a companion, where you still have a PC at home. As we got into last year or so, 2 years ago, we started to deliver multi-core processors at advanced technologies like 32 nanometer and up 28 nanometer, where the performance is significantly increased to the point where many people now use a tablet as their primary compute device. And the performance of these devices is increasing very rapidly, while at the same time we're keeping the energy and the battery usage in check. Last year we released our new V8 cores that provide 64-bit support as well, much higher level of performance as well, and these kinds of devices will also take us further so that a much broader range of compute devices can be based on these technologies as well. So this post-PC era really means it's an era of flexibility, and I'll show you that in a few moments. It's an area of taking this technology, and instead of having PC where one of them is gray and one of them is black and one of them is thick and one of them is thin, it's putting into very customized experiences that satisfy a range of customer needs. Now, I talked before about expanding the smartphone market and making it more approachable to folks. Well, the market today, this is 2012, we think around 800 million units were shipped in 2012, of which the premium sector was the dominant portion of the market. This is the kind of phones that probably you and I have in our pocket, premium smartphones. The basic smartphone category was relatively new. This is a lower cost smartphone that still provides smartphone functionality. But what's interesting as you go into 2017 on to 2020 is this mainstream segment. Both segments are growing. You see there's growth in both. But the mainstream segment is growing much more rapidly than the rest of the market. And part of the reason is we're driving solutions that enable lower cost. Just the last month, we announced our new Cortex-A12 processor and a companion graphics solution that's also low cost. And we believe that those solutions can enable solutions that are much more cost effective, and as a result can put smartphones in more people's hands. So you say, well, a smartphone costs a lot of money, right? Well, actually, we're getting to the point where people will be selling smartphones for $100. In 2013, we've seen quad-core Cortex-A series applications. These are, for example, Cortex-A7, our value segment processor. Very small silicon area with full-featured Android OS, or perhaps some new OSs like Firefox. Integrated solutions. Maybe it's a one-chip solution or a very small number of chips that get cost down with a 3G modem. Many of these solutions have ARM graphics in them, and yet they're implemented on perhaps 40 nanometer, in some cases 28 nanometer solutions, and it's all oriented around a very low-cost device. So the idea is if we can make solutions that are much more cost-effective, then we can put a smartphone capability in more users' hands. Now, look, a premium segment, I'm going to go back. A premium segment smartphone and a mass market smartphone may have different capabilities. Okay? The screen's probably going to be a little nicer on the premium phone. You might have more cores. Those cores might be a little bit higher performance. But at the end of the day, the difference between the feature phone today, a phone that's not configurable, you can't add apps, you can't surf the internet, and an entry-level smartphone is still a very strong difference. And as a result, we're seeing customers being very interested. Some customers still want the premium phone, and some customers want the premium phone, and some customers want the mass market, the smartphone, because it still has the flexibility and the smartphone experience. So let's shift over and talk about connected devices. Ultimately, what smartphones are about and what the industry is about, and the reason the growth is happening so rapidly is because there's so much more information you can have access to at your fingertips that you never had access to before. And that ranges from things like telemetrics about buildings, about heating, medical devices, a wide range of things you can have access to that you never had access to before. In fact, we're seeing some companies, there's an example from Samsung, some companies really focusing on the smartphone as the hub of your personal experience. For example, I like to run, I'm a runner, and so if you've got a heart rate monitor, well, the heart rate monitor connects now more often to your smartphone, and it tracks your workout and says, well, you're working out really well, you should have ran faster on this hill. Things like gesture control, connecting with devices at home like how's your weight going, and things like looking at your sleep, looking at your activity level throughout the day. These kinds of sensor data is very important. Now, some of this may seem, not critical, but actually, more and more, as people have chronic diseases and need to be monitored continuously, if we can have this data connected and perhaps transmitted to their doctor on a continuous basis, that can improve the quality of life for people. It can improve the quality of results in medical care and probably also reduce costs. So we see this as a very important growing trend. In general, this connectivity is driving trends in microcontrollers that are very exciting. I mean, we expect internet-enabled devices in 2020 to be very, very strong. 12 billion units is shown here, but depending on which slice of the market you look at, based on a number of different key areas. For example, personal devices we talked about, and here's another example. I've got right here, this is a Pebble watch. If you haven't read about Pebble, it's a very interesting story. It's an ARM-based wearable device. Cortex M3 is inside, and it does a lot of things. One of the things it does is it's a kind of a portable screen to your phone. If you're in a meeting, your smartphone's in your pocket, and you get a text message that says you're late to your next meeting, it pops up on your watch and you can see your text message. Now you can't reply to it, but you can read it and know what's going on. Likewise, when you get a phone call, it might be really important. It might be your wife, or it might be something that you can defer to later. It comes right up on your watch. It's very interesting. By the way, the interesting story about this company, if you haven't read about it, it's a very small company that got funded with Kickstarter, and they came from nothing very, very rapidly to do this very interesting application, and it was made possible by ARM-based microcontrollers that are very low cost and very low power. I talked about connected cities. So we talked about streetlights earlier. What could we do if, imagine when you're driving down the street, 100 yards up, the streetlights turn on. So there's no cars, no pedestrians on the street. Streetlights dim lower to save power. And as cars or pedestrians walk down the street, streetlights turn on. It saves power, makes the lights last longer, but it's still safe. In case it doesn't detect you, the lights are still on, but they turn on much brighter when they detect pedestrians. We see some cities rolling this out, and more, if we can do this kind of thing, and sharing information is very helpful. I talked about medical devices earlier. More and more you're going to see devices where it's a device that looks like a Band-Aid. I think it means it's more approachable. But devices you hold up to your body, you hold up to your pulse or something, and it gets very interesting data, and that can get shared with your doctor, of course, if you want it to be. Likewise, in the connected home. Today, probably your dishwasher, probably your refrigerator, your washing machine aren't connected to the internet. But actually, they're very big consumers of energy. So if we have a day where it's very hot, a lot of air conditioners are running, wouldn't it be great if the power company could say, hey, Mr. Washer and dryer and Mr. Dishwasher, could you wait a little bit and run your cycle in another hour? So that's a reason why maybe we could avoid rolling blackouts. That'd be good. But actually, as a consumer, there's a benefit to you as well. If you could coordinate with the power company, we're seeing programs where actually you can be offered lower power rates because the power company can balance out power usage and be more efficient with power usage. So by connecting the home, actually, there's a societal benefit, and there's also a benefit to your wallet, and that's really great. So I think you're seeing more and more trends where devices like that are going to be connected. And this connectivity is going to drive the need for connectivity at every level. Of course, the products themselves, the microcontroller-based products and things, will have to have wireless connections as well and send their data back somewhere. You'll have to have gateways, whether they're home-based gateways, whether they're metro-based wireless networks, mesh networks, or something like that, and of course the infrastructure as well to process them. And all of those solutions are going to be required to deliver these experiences as we go forward. Ultimately, I don't want to spend time on this slide, but one of the interesting things about ARM is that we have a wide range of price points. Our very, very small Cortex M0 core is only a handful of gates, all the way up to our higher performance Cortex M core, and then for those applications requiring real-time performance, we have those that provide great real-time response as well. So a wide range of applications, and that's one of the unique things about ARM, is we don't have one solution. We have a range of solutions, but then more importantly than that, customers build on top of those solutions in a customized way. So here's an example of 6 different products. They're all based on ARM microcontrollers. Here's M0. Here's M0 Plus, that's even smaller. M3, that's the same chip that's in this phone, or the same core that's in this watch. Here's another one. And what's interesting about these is there's 6 different solutions from 6 different providers with 6 different wireless technologies, different performance points, different power points, different cost points, and each one of them is probably very well suited for one market or the other. So for you, as semiconductor professionals, there are opportunities to find niche markets that need specific connectivity, specific technology, specific sensors, that you can provide a differentiated solution, and that's very exciting. The plot here is showing how also by these cores being extremely energy efficient, these chips being extremely energy efficient, they can operate for a long time. We're seeing a demand for people to embed a sensor inside a device with one of those coin cell batteries, looks like a quarter, right? And that will last for 5 years or 10 years on a coin cell battery. Because that's the kind of application where it needs to be, you install it and you forget about it for a long time. And that's the kind of application we're trying to deliver. Here's another example. This is done by a company called Streetline, and they have deployments in various places. I think they've got one of these in San Francisco as well, where they have parking sensors, and in the parking sensors they have a microcontroller embedded in there that self-discovers through a mesh network and says there are 7 free spots in the parking lot. So rather than you drive up to a parking lot only to know it's full, there's 7 spots left. Now, if you ever go to one of those parking lots today that has a counter going in and out, it's just counting cars going in and out, and that's okay. But wouldn't it be cool if you know, well, it's not spot number 17 that has a spot. It's on the 3rd floor. Actually, if you go to Santana Row up the street, they have actually an installation that may or may not be this exact technology, but similar to that. So it tells you exactly which floor to go to and park, and that saves you time, and it makes more efficient use of limited resources. So let me shift over and talk about energy. As we talked about, energy use is increasing, and there'll be increased demand on that as population grows. So who knows what this is? This is Three Gorges Dam in China. It's engineering marvel. It's cost $22 billion to build, and it contains 27 million cubic meters, not cubic feet, cubic meters of concrete to build it. And that's incredible accomplishment. And this generates 21 gigawatts of power from this hydroelectric dam, replacing what would otherwise be a lot of coal-fired plants or other less green sources of energy. So that's great. The problem is there are only so many Three Gorges dams you can build. So ultimately, power construction is limited, and we need to be wise and careful with the energy we use. And we need to do that in lots of different ways. First, we need to manage our power effectively. First, on the production side, you need to balance the production so that you're providing the power when consumers need it. You need to manage the distribution of it so that it goes to the right places at the right time. Also, the sensing I talked about is sensing the power load, maybe deciding that now is not a good time to run the dryer. I'll wait an hour or I'll wait a half an hour and that gets a better result, and so on. So there's lots of different opportunities here for better usage of power. It also applies to infrastructure as well. As we look at servers, by the way, we think that there's about $100 billion in savings over the next 20 years that could be provided just by being efficient with energy. Now, we think the infrastructure is going to evolve as well. Now, today ARM is not very prevalent in servers, but I'll tell you why we think that is probably going to change over time. Today, the digital warehouses, these are data centers that have big warehouses full of computers, use 30 billion watts of electricity. That's around equivalent to 30 nuclear power plants to power the data centers worldwide. That's pretty huge. And data center power consumption is growing by 63%. That's a huge growth in 2012. So this is clearly something that's unsustainable if it just continues to grow rapidly like that. White space, which is what they call the floor space. You see those white tiles in a server room. White space, floor space is supposed to grow 20%, around 19 to 20% in 2012. So big growth in area of these data centers. But in fact, most of this server infrastructure is underutilized. And I think that's because there's a poor match between the kinds of servers that are being provided and the kinds of traffic that's being utilized. If you think about servers, you probably think, when I say server, you probably think about the kind of server that's running database. You think Oracle database. You think it's doing flight reservations. Maybe it's doing data analytics, supercomputer stuff. Well, that's an important market, and that's a market that's probably not going to change as we go forward. Traditional enterprise applications, database, these kinds of high-performance computing applications are very compute intensive. But there are also a lot of applications that don't require as much compute, and they require a lot more data flow, for example, compared to the compute. Here's networking-based things like Netflix. If you stream a Netflix movie, well, that requires a lot of networking and a lot of storage, but not as much compute. Similar to a lot of cloud applications, they may require a little bit of analytics when using Facebook, but primarily it's serving a lot of data and serving a lot of endpoints at the same time, so it's a lot more scalability. So we think actually the trend in server applications is shifting. And if you look at the cloud-based applications, in 2012, traditional data center workloads dominated the server workloads in the world. Okay? But as we go into 2017, the annual growth rate of traditional workloads is only about 4%, but the growth rate of cloud-based servers, which is a very different compute profile that I showed you earlier, that requires many more nodes because it's based on the number of people who send requests, and much more connectivity versus compute, is growing at 21% cumulative growth rate. So we think that the workloads are shifting, and it's driving for the need for better density, better efficiency, and better utilization of the server infrastructure. And so, interestingly enough, our partners are already starting to roll out some of the earliest solutions for server applications in the data center. Here are 4 examples. Calzada, Texas-based startup, Marvell, one of our speakers later on, APM and LSI. These are 4 very different solutions based on ARM technologies. And what's interesting about this, and one of the things that's so interesting to our partners about ARM solutions is, each of these solutions has different ARM-based processors, some 32-bit, some are 64-bit. They will certainly migrate towards 64-bit, generally speaking. Some have a couple of cores, some have as many as 16 cores, and people are talking about bigger applications beyond that. And then many of them use other ARM technologies. But you see the rest of those applications are customized, value-added components in software, in hardware, in connectivity, in specialty compute that is customized to an individual partner's needs. So one partner might focus on a certain market application that requires perhaps many network ports. Another one might focus on an application that's more vertical, like a Facebook type application, and so on. Different kinds of applications are going to require different things. And so that's really exciting, and we see that the ability for our partners to differentiate their end solution, even though it's based on a common ARM technology, differentiate their solution is very, very exciting. Finally, let's talk about implementation. Implementing these chips, especially at the leading edge, can be very complicated. And in fact, our partners, because of the diversity of the solutions we just talked about, they need the ability to deliver these optimized performance points very quickly, because of course the market is competitive. Time to market is important. If you get your solution out earlier, you do better than your competitor who doesn't. And so it requires a lot of smarts in balancing power, performance, functionality, cost, and just finding the right balance is really important. And our partners continuously look for guidance and solutions on how they can do this better. So what ARM tries to provide is a solution that we kind of call it a layer cake. You see a layer cake at a wedding has lots and lots of layers. Well, the reality is any good solution has that kind of trend. At the high end, at the top level, you need software, application software, middleware, compilers, and those kind of solutions, graphics drivers, and so on, that provide the integration at the end. You need the connectivity IP on chip that connects together the high-performance interfaces and the high-performance compute things, often with data coherency, which is more and more important as you have multi-core solutions. But the processors themselves are Cortex processors and our Mali graphics processor family. And then at the implementation level, the transistor level, and this is the area I represent, Artisan Physical IP provides logic and memory compilers to help our customers realize those chips in silicon. But you have to have all of these elements. And so what ARM is trying to do both with our own products and also through the ARM connected community of partners, where we're now over 1,000 partners that provide either chip solutions software, hardware, IP, foundry services, all of those kinds of applications. That partnership provides a unique solution to our partners. One thing I want to talk about in implementation, this is an exciting trend that perhaps you know about, and if you don't, I think it's good for you to know, is something we rolled out a couple years ago called Big Little. And this is very much like, metaphorically, very much like a hybrid car. I don't know if you have a hybrid car, but imagine you could have a Prius, a hybrid car, with a very energy efficient engine, but it also had a Ferrari engine. Okay, so when you're on the highway, you're already rolling, and all you want to do is maintain your speed, your energy efficient engine is great. But when you're at a stoplight or you need to accelerate on the highway, wouldn't it be great if you could run the Ferrari engine for a little while and get great performance and then shut it off? And that's very much like what we're doing here. What ARM rolled out 2 years ago is pairs of processors that are absolutely, completely architecturally compatible. You can run the same exact software on one or the other. In fact, the software doesn't know if it's running on the high-performance processor or the efficient processor. They're all efficient, but one's really, really efficient and one's high-performance. And we call this Big Little. And interestingly enough, if you look at that, there's the little is capitalized. You say, well, why is the big capitalized? Well, the little is capitalized because the observation is actually you're running the little much more of the time. If you think about your smartphone, okay, most of your smartphones, I hope all of your smartphones, are in your pocket right now, not doing much. There's no need to run a high-performance processor when it's in your pocket, not doing anything. But when you're playing a game, maybe when you're streaming a movie or downloading a web page, you want the snappy, responsive performance. And so the big processor kicks in. But it actually only needs to run for a short amount of time, and then it goes right back to the little processor. If you go to any of the trade shows, ARM shows a demonstration of how this works and how actually you can spend a significant portion of the time in the little processor, and the energy savings can be well over 50% energy savings as a result. So we rolled this out. This is a trend for all of our processors now and in the future. And these applications with Big Little implementation are coming up to into production now. The first products are available in the market right now. It's also important at the implementation level, at the transistor level. My division, the physical IP division, provides standard cells and memory IP, and we believe this IP we provide is the highest quality in the market. And it also is very, very well suited to ARM cores. In fact, we roll out a product we call POP. And this is something which is specifically targeted, enabling our customers to implement ARM processors and ARM graphics cores faster with better results and better time to market. So that you don't have to do all of the experiments. We do hundreds of experiments to say what's the best configuration, what's the best kinds of memory structures you could use, and then we provide that information to our customers to accelerate their time to market. So in summary, we think that the growth opportunities in the semiconductor market are substantial. We see many markets you saw where the potential growth rate of the markets is well over 10%. Some of the trends in the mobile device area are such that in the post-PC era, we're seeing shifts towards these devices very rapidly. And at the value segment, the mainstream smartphone area, for example, is a very, very strong growth area. In connected devices, we see connected device trends both in terms of personal devices as well as medical, regional devices, or even Internet of Things-based infrastructure devices are growing in importance and is a very, very sizable market as we get into 2020, over 20 billion units seen by most people. Energy use is critical at every level, at the generation level, distribution, at the city level, and the personal level. And so there's many things we can do to make energy use more efficient. And finally, as semiconductor professionals, we need to deliver these solutions to our partners and our customers wisely and efficiently. And we need to work together both with ARM and with our connected community partners to enable this implementation success. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I hope that was interesting for you in learning about the future.
John, thank you for the inspiring and informative talk. We will reserve a few minutes for Q&A.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question. For the telecommunication, we have two systems. One is the internet. Another one is the telecom system. Telecom system is 137 years old infrastructure. Internet is 37. The different internet circular switch, which is standard
Sure.
electric signal, single piece, the whole piece signal, even as a package switch. So it's a packaging based on standing by signal. It seems to me the drawback, the bottleneck is the thing that not talk to telecom system. We use the wire wireless devices actually go to
Right.
This question I have been asked for 30 years, since 2008. Actually, I have worked at I'm still sitting here for 30 years. I just wonder what's your opinion, what's your understanding? Is there any improvement, progress in this area?
Of connecting phones versus
network systems together to complete.
well, I mean, I just moved to a new house, and I didn't sign up for a telephone line. I have the voice over IP, so I'm using internet protocol for everything I do, and phones today, are using packetized networks as you mentioned. So I don't know. I think more and more you're seeing the shift towards packet-based networks in most applications in voice and so on. Voice over IP is a growing trend. I don't know the specific numbers, but I'm not sure if I've answered your question. But it seems to me like they're shifting towards IP as a protocol because IP can be better managed than a circuit switch approach. That seems to be the general trend from what I can tell. Question?
What is the policy of your licenses and to the Chinese university? I used to be here, work for Intel, and now I'm a professor in China. I used to work for Intel. Now I'm a professor in China. So just a few months ago, I was trying to get a license, evaluation license for Chinese university, but I was told rejected. So my application is try to get a evaluation license for the N0, I believe. So it looks like that in the U.S. university you have a different policy.
I don't think that's exactly right. I mean, I think we have an active university program worldwide. I mean, our goal is to help universities learn about ARM and ARM-based architectures. I'm happy to take your card and give you a connection to the university program. But we vigorously try to make our technology available to universities. Of course, we have to start somewhere, and so we can't necessarily provide to everyone who asks. But I think the goal is absolutely to expand that very rapidly, and we have dedicated people focusing on that.
Thanks.
In the back.
Recently, ARM developed a 3D graphics chip IP called Mali.
Molly, yeah.
Yeah, can you give me some information? Can you give us some information about Mali?
Sure.
And what's the position between Mali and Imagination Graphics?
Sure. So Molly is something that we've been developing for several years now, and about 2 years ago we rolled out our leading edge line, which is the T600 series Molly, and that is a very high-end solution that provides not only 3D graphics but also GPU compute. And Molly is seeing very, very strong growth. We're seeing very strong adoption in many segments. Some smartphones, for example, many of the Samsung Galaxy phones based on Molly graphics, for example. There are others. Also smart TVs, very, very strong adoption of Molly in smart TVs. Most of the manufacturers are adopting Molly in that sector. So it is growing as an application, but we also provide a range of applications for 2 cores up to 8 cores, depending on the graphics need. And we also have a more low-end line, the T200, 300, and 400 series, which doesn't provide GPU compute, but provides efficient 3D graphics. So it's a very fast-growing area. It's still much younger than the rest of ARM's processors, but it's growing. In some segments, it's being adopted very rapidly, and it continues to grow. We've said publicly, we've exceeded our growth projections for this year in Molly.
Considering so many connected MCUs,
Yes.
Will ARM get into connectivity IP area?
That's a good question for the future. You have to look for the future. Right now, our focus is on providing the microcontrollers themselves and enabling providers. Today, we don't provide anything in that space, but you have to look for the future.
Hi, how do you think about the future of Internet of Things? And do you think the growth point is more on the software side or on the application side?
Oh, no, it's all. I mean, you can't. The Internet of Things it's not a market; it's a trend. Okay, there's medical devices, there's engineering devices. You know, putting sensors in the bridge so that you know if there's concrete has strained. There's devices for you talked about the fields, the network fields there, diagnostics. All of those things. Those are all different markets, but they're all under the Internet of Things trend. So we see that growth is very, very strong. As I showed you, the growth rate is very, very pronounced. Now, of course, when you have those hardware-based solutions, you also need software on top of it that does interesting analytics, services, connecting it together. So I think absolutely both of those will be important, and I don't think either one or the other is more important. But the units, what I showed was semiconductor chip units, and that is growing very strong, and that will enable both hardware and software. Yeah.
Let me rephrase my question as, what do you think about what is the most difficult point to achieve Internet of Things? What is the most difficult technology?
What's most difficult?
Technology
Well,
obstacles.
I think the important thing is, you know, you saw all the different solutions. I mean, everyone is coming up with different solutions for how to connect things together. One of the things today is that there's no single winning solution for, you know, local area networks. I don't mean local networks, but I mean low power networks. There's Bluetooth Smart, there's 6LoWPAN, there's all these different solutions that are coming out, and no one standard is there. So today there's interoperability that's not there yet. But like anything, you know, you have DVDs, there's Blu-ray and DVD and all these different competing solutions, VHS and Beta, all these different solutions where there's competing solutions that come out first, and one of them over time emerges as the winner. So today I think there's a lot of infrastructure work because there's no single standard, but over time I think more and more standards will win and exist. And but so today I think there's software and integration work to be done because there's no single standard.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
So my name is Harry. I have a question regarding the process. As you just mentioned, that ARM is trying to move into the server area, and in those area we know the process may play a big important role.
Mm-hmm.
So how does ARM is doing this field regarding the competition to Intel?
Sure. Well, this is my area. So I'll give you $5 later. You know, we work very closely with all the major foundries and providing low power IP that helps customers integrate their chips together. Actually, as you look at these kind of server applications, it's not about maximum performance. It's about maximum efficiency and maximum throughput. So in fact, we're seeing people use different process choices than you might think. It's not just about the very, very, very fastest thing for servers. In fact, actually, the area probably where ARM will grow is in the medium compute space where the technology is more than capable of delivering the performance needed. And in fact, we get results through parallelism, multiple servers on a chip, multiple interfaces on a chip, higher density of blades within a system. So actually, I work very hard with the foundries making sure that there are process solutions available for a range of markets. But the process technologies available today are more than capable of delivering fantastic energy-efficient servers that provide great benefit to the cloud-based kind of application.
All right. Thank you, John, for the talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have a person to present a appreciation pack.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.